Hello. I first met Yoko Tawada on the page. In 2005, to be exact, in the prosaically named A Journal for Writers and Readers, published by PEN America. The issue's theme was metamorphosis, and it opened with a piece of fiction by Tawada entitled Canned Foreign, as in something that is in a can that you would find in a grocery store. It was translated by Susan Bonofsky. The second piece of fiction, entitled Body Language, was one that I had written. In 2005, Tawada was a new author to me, but certainly not to the literary world, which had already bestowed upon her numerous awards, and deservedly so. Canned Foreign was a rumination on language and what it meant to be foreign within one. The narrator, a transplant to Hamburg, Germany, and to the German language, admits, quote, "Often it sickened me to hear people speak their native tongues fluently. It was as if they were unable to think and feel anything, but what their language so readily served up to them," close quote. That ease, the seamlessness, that unbroken connection, like an unsevered umbilical cord between thoughts and feelings and everyday language, I had observed it and envied it since the age of 6, when my first language, Vietnamese, was replaced with English. Bilingualism was not a useful survival tactic for a refugee child in a small town in the American South in the mid-70s. So, for much of my youth, I saw the ability to live within your native tongue as a privilege, and one that I had been denied. It was only later, when I began to write, that I came to understand how Tawada's narrator felt. It is precisely the alienation within a language foreign to your own, and then even after fluency, the residual alienation, the memory of the disconnect, the awkward fit, the stumble, the doubt, the adaptation, and if we are to thrive, the improvisation and wordplay that brought me to a writing life. Tawada's narrator's use of the word sickened, however, suggests something even stronger and subversive. That it's not her narrator who is in a state of want or deprivation, who is in fact sick, but rather it is those around her who exist the entirety of their lives within their native tongues. The umbilical cord connecting their thoughts and feelings to their everyday language can also be seen as a feeding tube, necessary, vital, but ultimately lacking in choice. After reading Tawada's Canned Foreign, I knew that I would willingly follow, in every sense of the word, this author, wherever she and her characters would venture next. On rare occasions, I will read an author's work and have the feeling that I am in the house or room of a friend. That was part of an email that I sent to Yoko Tawada 11 years later, after I met her in person here in New York in December of 2016 at the Goethe Institute, where she was reading from her novel, Memoirs of a Polar Bear, also translated by Bronowski. In 2005, I have to admit that I'd made certain assumptions about Yoko Tawada based solely on her name and on my lack of knowledge about the multiple languages and countries within which she lives and writes. I thought that canned foreign was a translation of a Japanese text. I now know that Bronowski is a German to English translator, and thus working from a German text. I also now know that Tawada is herself a literary translator, fascinatingly of her own works, from Japanese to German and vice versa. Tawada also writes in both languages. So whether Bronowski was working with a translation or from an original is something that I can no longer assume. And for me, it is this blurring and questioning of such fixed categories, translation and original, newcomer and native, foreign and home, animal and human, existence and extinction, that is the marrow of Tawada's remarkable body of work. In the novel that you'll hear from tonight, I think, The Emissary, translated from the Japanese by Margaret Mitsutani, we, Tawada's intrepid readers, are jettisoned into a new world. It is a brave one, but the word brave is defined differently here. The Japanese language novel was published in 2014, post the Fukushima nuclear meltdown in 2011, which was the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. This work of speculative fiction finds us in Japan, where hope is as small as a piece of an orange, where foreign words are forbidden, where native words become obsolete when the concepts that they signify no longer exist, such as the word healthy applied to the bodies of children. In this new world, we, Tawada's astonished readers, are connected to a great-grandfather and his great-grandson, not by umbilical cords, and hopefully not with feeding tubes, though there are some in the Emissary, but by Tawada's language, singular and plural, which in her hands are alive and in a constant, brilliant state of metamorphosis. It's my honor to welcome Yoko Tawada.
Good evening. I arrived the day before yesterday in New York, and it was a real polar bear weather. And when it is snowing, there are less tourists in the city, but more children. And in my novel, there's also a child, Mumei, who is living with his great-grandfather, Yoshiro. Still in his blue silk pajamas, Mumei sat with his bottom flat on the tatami. Perhaps it was his head, much too large for his slender long neck, that made him look like a baby bird. He was fine as silk, Sweat struck to his scalp, damp with sweat. His eyes nearly shut. He moved his head as if searching the air, trying to catch on his tympanic membrane the scalping of footsteps on gravel. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped. The sliding door rattled like a foreign train, and as Mumei opened up his eyes, morning light, yellow as melted dandelions, poured in. The boy threw back his shoulders, puffed out his chest, and struck out both his arms like a bird spreading its wings. 無名は青い絹の寝巻きを着たまま、畳の上にべったり尻をつけて座っていた。どこかひな鳥を思わせるのは、首が細長い割に頭が大きいせいかもしれない。瞳をうっすら閉じ、空中を耳で探るように頭を動かして、外の砂利道を踏みしべる。足音を鼓膜ですくい取ろうとする。足音はどんどん大きくなっていって突然止まる。無名は翼を広げるように両手を外回りに持ち上げた。Smiling deep winkles around his eyes, Yoshiro came closer. Smiling deep winkles around his eyes, Yoshiro came closer, his shoulders heaving. No sooner had he lowered his head, lifting a foot to take off a shoe, than beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. Every morning, Yoshiro rented a dog from the rent-a-dog place on the center corner to run with along the riverbank for about half an hour. When the water level was low, the river looked like silver ribbons that stretched out much further than you'd expect. Long ago, this sort of purposeless running had been referred to as jogging. But with foreign words falling out of use, it was now called loping down, an expression that had started out as a joke, meaning, if you lope, your blood pressure goes down. But everybody called it that these days, and kids Mumei's age would never have dreamt that adding just an E in front of the word lope could conjure up visions of a young woman climbing down a ladder in the middle of the night to run away with her lover. 駆け落ちはかければ落ちる血圧が、用もなく走る人呼ぶジョギングと、犬借りて散歩する人レンタル犬。Yet even now, when foreign words were rarely used, the walls of the rent-a-dog store were still plastered with the katakana script used to write them. When Yoshiro had just started loping down and wasn't sure how much speed he could manage, he'd first tended a Yorkshire Terrier, thinking a small dog might better, but then he'd find it much too fast. He'd stumbled, almost falling, gasping for breath, as the dog pulled him along, turning its head now and then, cheekily holding its snout high with a self-satisfied air, as if to say, "How's that for speed?" The following morning, he'd tried a dachshund that turned out to be so lazy it had sunk to the ground after the first 200 yards or so, facing Yoshiro to drag it all the way back to the rent-a-dog place. 散歩が苦手な犬もいるんですね。Some dogs sure don't like to go for a walk. He'd griped as he returned the animal. A what? A walk? Oh yeah, a walk, ha ha ha, laughed the man behind the counter. finally catching on. It was a spurious sort of laugh directed at this old geezer who still used outdated expressions like a walk. The shelf life of words was getting shorter all the time. It wasn't only the foreign ones that were falling out of use, and some words that had disappeared after being labeled old-fashioned had no heirs to take their place. 先週は思い切ってシェパードを借りてみたが、これはダックスフントの逆で訓練されすぎていて、こちらが引け目を感じた。Sandwiched in between the 8-mat room and the kitchen was a room with a wooden floor about 6.5 feet wide, in which a light hold-out picnic table and holding chairs like the one anglers use were set up. As if to add to the gay summer exclusion atmosphere, on the table was a thermos emblazoned with a picture of raccoon dog with a huge dandelion sticking out of it. Recently, all dandelions had petals at least 4 inches long. Someone has even submitted one of these jumbo dandelions to the annual chrysanthemum show at the Civil Center, giving rise to a debate over whether it should be recognized as a chrysanthemum. 大きなタンポポは菊ではなくタンポポの突然変異に過ぎない。Oversized dandelions are not chrysanthemum, merely mutations, assert one faction, while other charges that 突然変異は差別用語だ。Mutation was a pejorative term, further inflaming the war of words. 実際、突然変異という言葉は、こういう文脈ではもうほとんど使われておらず、代わりに環境同化という言葉が流行っていた。Actually, the word mutation was rarely used anymore, having been replaced by the more popular environmental adaptation. With most plants growing larger and larger, if the dandelions alone had stayed small, it would have ended up like a kept woman hiding away in the shadow. It had simply grown larger in order to survive in this new environment. Yet, there were other plants that had chosen to survive by getting smaller. A new species of bamboo, no larger than a person's little finger when fully grown, had been named the pinky bamboo. Among the anti-dandelions faction were those who said, 菊は家紋に選ばれるような高貴な花であり、タンポポは雑草だから一緒にしてはならない。The chrysanthemum, that noble flower chosen for the imperial crest, cannot be put in the same category as a weed. Whereupon the Dandelion Support Association, comprised mainly of members of the Brotherhood of Ramen Workers, fired back with a famous imperial decree that there is no such thing as a weed, which finally silenced their enemies, ending the 7-month-long chrysanthemum dandelions controversy. 吉郎はタンポポを見ると、子供の頃に野原に一人仰向けに寝転がって空を眺めていた時間を思い出す。空気は暖かく、下草はひんやりしている。遠くから鳥のさえずりが聞こえてくる。For Yoshiro, one looked like at a dandelion was enough to bring back childhood memories of lying in a grassy field, gazing up at the sky. The air was warm, the grass cool. He heard birds chirping far away. Turning his head to one side, he would see a dandelion in bloom, looming just slightly above his eyes. Sometimes he would stick out his lips like a bird's beak to give it a kiss. Then suddenly sit up, looking around to make sure no one had seen. Mumei had never once played in a real field. Even so, he seemed to have an image of a field he carefully cultivated in his mind. Yoshiro imagined himself packing a small suitcase with clothes and toiletries, then taking the train and bus to Narita Airport. It had been years since he had been to Shinjuku. What was it like now? Billboards, far too gaudy to be overlooking ruins. Traffic lights changing regularly from red to green on streets without a single car. Automatic doors opening and closing for non-existent employees, reacting perhaps to big branches on the trees that lined the streets, bending down in the wind. In blanket halls, the smell of cigarettes smoked long ago frozen in the silver silence. At table after table in the pubs, on each floor of multi-tenant buildings, customers called absence caroused, drinking and eating their fill for a flat fee. With no one to borrow money, the interest demanded by loan sharks rusted in its tracks. Without buyers, mounds of bargain underwear grew damp and faded. Mold formed on handbags displayed in show windows now flooded with rainwater, and rats took leisurely naps inside high-heeled shoes. From sidewalk cracks, stacks of shepherd's pearls grew straight up 6 feet high. Now that human beings had disappeared from this urban center, the cherry trees that had once stood demurely beside sidewalks, slender as brooms, had grown thicker around the trunk, their branches spreading boldly out in all 4 directions, their luxuriant green afros swaying gently back and forth in the breeze. Yoshiro imagined himself at Shinjuku Station, boarding a deserted Narita Express for the airport. In fact, no one was riding the express. The train, whose foreign name had once projected the very image of speed, or drinking espresso either. At the airport terminal, there was no one at the checkpoint, so no need to show his passport. The terminal sign, written in Chinese characters, had been taken down long ago and was now propped up against a wall. Climbing the creaky steps of the frozen escalator, he found all the check-in counters abandoned, a huge spider's web covering each one like an umbrella. Looking more closely, he saw that there was a spider about the size of the palm of his hand in each one, calmly waiting for prey. There were colorful stripes on one spider's back, black at the top, red, then yellow. Germany was his destination. That must explain it, he thought. He took a cautious look at the counter next door and saw that its spider had red, white, and blue stripes. There are smaller red spiders here and there in the web too, with white stars on their backs. どういうわけか、吉郎はそんな空港の様子をはっきりと思い浮かべることができた。自分から思い浮かべようとしなくても、映像が勝手に脳に入ってきて、小説に書いてくれとせがむ。しかし、誰も行く人のいない空港の様子を書くのは危険である。Yoshiro didn't know why he was able to picture the airport so clearly, with no effort on his part. These images just came to him, begging to be written into a novel. But it would be dangerous to write about an airport nobody went to anymore. What if the government was keeping it off limits to the public on purpose because state secrets were hidden there? Sneaking into a forbidden place to dig up forbidden knowledge didn't interest him at all. But even if what he published was only a description of what he had imagined, if his fiction happened to correspond too closely to what the airport was really like, he might be arrested for leaking state secrets. Providing in a court of law that it had come from his imagination might be awfully difficult. And would they even give him a trial? Not that he found the idea of going to prison particularly frightening, but wondering how Mumei would survive without him worried him so much that he couldn't bring himself to take many risks. How many years had it been since the absence of animals other than rental dogs and dead cats had ceased to bother him? Though he had heard something about a rabbit union formed by people who secretly kept rabbits. Since he didn't know anyone who belonged, he couldn't even show Mumei a living rabbit. Mumei, 待っていろ。お前が自分の歯では切り刻めない食物繊維のジャンルをひいおじいちゃんが代わりに切り刻んで命への道を開いてやるから。俺は無名の歯だ。無名、太陽をどんどん体内に取り入れろ。自分はサメだと思ってごらん。口の中には立派な歯が並んでいる。見ただけでみんなが逃げていくような大きな尖った歯だ。唾液は満ち潮。波のひだがひたひた押し寄せてくる。お前は喉の筋肉がすごく発達しているからね。地球をそっくりそのまま飲み込んでしまうことだってできるよ。Just wait, Mumei. Great grandpa will cut through the jungle of vegetable fiber. Your teeth cannot manage carving out the road to health and life. I will be your teeth, Mumei. Absorb the sun into your body. Imagine you are a shark. Your mouth full of fine white teeth, so huge and sharp that whoever sees them runs away in terror. Your saliva is at high tide, wave upon wave, filling your mouth. Your throat muscles so strong you could swallow the earth. Your gut is an indoor pool full of gastric juices. And under its glass roof, the sun soaks in your gastric pool. Unlike other planets, the Earth is blessed with the sun's light every day. Thanks to Lord Apollo, it is full of strange and wonderful forms. Even now, jellyfish, octopi, frilled lizards, crabs, rhinoceroses, human beings, and lots of other creatures live on the earth, changing all the time. Buds sprout from an embryo which opens the shape of a heart. Tadpoles, like little musical notes, turn into frogs, like the round wooden drums you see in temples. Caterpillars became butterflies. Winkly newborns age into wrinkled old men. In the past 10 years or so, lots of species have gone extinct, but the earth is still warm and bright. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anya Migdal, and I had the immeasurable pleasure, as well as the daunting task, of translating Tatyana Tolstaya's Aetherial Worlds, a collection of 18 stories that Tatyana will be reading from a little later. But before I go on, there's a confession I must make. The reason I'm standing here tonight is nepotism, pure and simple. You see, Tatyana is my mother-in-law and the grandmother of my 2 children. In fact, my daughter Alice should be somewhere over there. There she is. Hi, Alice. But that's not all. My parents' friendship with Tatyana and her siblings goes back to their youth. My grandfather and Tatyana's father, to whom Aetherial Worlds is dedicated, were also friends. Our roots go deep and intertwine throughout 3 generations. I know many of the people that Tatyana mentions in this collection. I've been to many of the places that she describes. Hopefully, this does not make me the Jared Kushner of translating. As a Russian speaker, it is somewhat strange to be tasked with introducing Tatyana Tolstaya. In Russia, she needs no introductions. As a regular presence on TV, she's a host, or she used to be a host of a talk show, as well as being one of the most revered and celebrated authors of her generation. She's recognized on the street wherever she goes. However, Aetherial Worlds is the first English translation of Tatyana's work in 20 years. It's not that there hadn't been offers to publish during this time. Tatyana simply didn't have a translator whom she trusted enough to do it. The brilliant Jamie Gambrell, who used to work with Tatyana before me, was no longer available, and so Tatyana's books in Russian piled up, but no one had the opportunity to read them in English. And this actor slash musician slash budding writer just had to change that. See, that's part 2 of my confession. I'm not really a translator. Tatyana and I had previously collaborated on some translations of plays together, most notably of Last Summer in Chelyabinsk, a gorgeous play by Alexandra Van Pilov that no one in the English language speaking world knows about yet, and Chekhov's 3 Sisters. But I had never translated prose or poetry. And then one fine day, out of the blue, Tatyana sent me Smoke and Shadows, which is in the collection, and said, "Why don't you give it a go? You're good at this." Encouraged by such a strong vote of confidence from an author for whom I had bottomless admiration, I began my personal exploration of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You guys know what that is, right? That's when people of low ability suffer from delusions of superiority. Well, let me tell you, it was a hard and long slog to metacognition. Working on this first story was painfully humbling. My respect and awe of Tatyana's genius grew with each sentence I struggled to translate. It's hard to convey my euphoria when after several long months of torment, Tatyana read my first draft and liked it, or my relief when the folks at the Iowa Review also liked it enough to publish it. Then Tatyana sent me some more stories that were subsequently published in the New Yorker, and then a bunch more, and now here we are, 3 years later, with the collection finally out. Tatyana's writing is seamless. tightly interweaving allegory, humor, cultural commentary, poetry, and slang. She often writes in the first person, and often about things that are personal to her. She fearlessly lays bare her soul and then ingeniously covers her tracks with a punchline. We both knew from the beginning that it would be impossible to simply translate all of these elements from the Russian. I needed to find parallels in English that carried the same linguistic and cultural connotations. I needed to find a way to convey not only the surface meaning, but also the undercurrents that Tatyana had built into each and every sentence. But nepotism to the rescue, Tatyana generously agreed to go over every single word of each draft to make sure nothing was lost in translation. And so this English version of Aetherial Worlds is a true collaboration. I would work on a draft, and once it was ready, I'd send it to Tatyana, and we'd discuss the nuances of every idiom, every metaphor, and every curse word. Now, this is because, as every Russian speaker knows, Russian profanity is an art form which takes a lifetime to master. The breadth of permutations is staggering and ever-growing. By contrast, the offerings in English feel paltry and restricted to just a few choice words, I'm sorry to say. I know we got the poetry right, but it's the expletives that keep me up at night. Now, I realize that Tatyana rather enjoys the anonymity that coming to the US affords her, but I hope that she will get as wide an audience here as she has in Russia. Her work changes you on a cellular level when you read it. Her voice deserves to be, expletive deleted, heard. Thank you very much, and without further ado, Tatyana Tolstaya.
Good evening. Hello. I will read two short stories from this collection, from the collection of Aetherial Worlds. The first story opens the collection, and it's called 2020. My grandfather, Alexei Tolstoy, a famous Russian writer, attended the St. Petersburg Technological Institute in his youth, starting in 1901, thinking he would like to become an engineer, but he never became one. He described to my father how difficult it was for him studying there. Here is his professor by the blackboard addressing the students. Let's picture a cigar-like object, and that's it. My young grandpa is in a trance. He is picturing something cigar-like. He sees a cigar. You need to clip the end of it before you can smoke it. Golden cutters carefully trim away the dry brown leaves. What wonderful aroma wafts from quality Havana tobacco. Out of nowhere appears a balloon-shaped brandy snifter full of heavy red-brown cognac, casting golden reflections. Oh, to grasp the glass in your palm, warming it, the undulating golden flickers, the bluish smoke, you inhale it, you tap the cigar to break off the ash. It's dusk, the heavy drapes drawn back. Outside, through the window, there is a crepuscular early evening on snowy St. Petersburg streets. A sleigh pulled by a courser silently whooshes by. Who's rushing and where? To the theater? To a romantic rendezvous? Suddenly, reality interrupts this waking dream. Cheers thunder, the professor erases the blackboard, wiping away formulas interesting and useful to any engineer. See you next time, gentlemen. Grandfather never finished his studies at the institute. He committed himself wholly to literature, becoming famous for, among other things, his historical novels. Writers who knew him personally described his imagination in the later years as clairvoyant. He was able to improvise, creating on the fly the most complicated dialogues, keeping them psychologically astute and peppering them with convincing historical specifics. He saw the past in great detail, every button on a jacket, every wrinkle in a dress. This ability to daydream was passed on to me, although not to the same extent. I didn't start out a writer and had no plans of becoming one. Although I happily swam in imaginary expanses, I had no words to describe them. Then, one fine day, when I was 32 years old, I decided to correct my myopia by undergoing surgery in the famous eye clinic of Professor Fyodorov. This was in 1983, before they used lasers for the procedure, as they do now, but instead made corneal incisions by hand with a regular razor blade. The incisions took 3 long months to heal. All this time, while the eyes recuperated, you could see things only poorly, approximately, through tears that constantly streamed like rain on the window pane. And after it was over, one day you'd literally wake up with perfect vision, 20/20. But before that happened, you had to sit in complete darkness. Such were the idiosyncrasies of the process that any light caused unsufferable eye pain. At first, for 3 or 4 days, the agony was so great that no analgesics, no sleeping pills brought any relief. Then it subsided a bit. Nonetheless, even at dusk, my eyes were ablaze, and the temporary respite of night was interrupted by accidental glances at the stars, their light burning like fiery needles. Finally, it was all I could do, sit at home wearing dark sunglasses, the black drapes closed, living by touch. Not a single word, neither handwritten nor typed, did my eyes take in during that prison sentence. Only music, invisible in its essence, saved me from this existential desert. All that was left of the world was music and pain. Gradually, something unfamiliar began to happen to my mind. The blindness was still near total. I didn't yet dare take off my sunglasses to peer outside, but in my mind's eye, I began to see bright visions from my past. They were not simply visions as before, similar to dreams. No, these were words, phrases, pages of text, plot lines. It was as if someone awoke in my head, a second me, one who had been slumbering until now. Visual experiences now came with a narrative. In fact, they were inseparable from it. If the wording wasn't exact, then the imagery it conjured seemed obscured by dust or fog, and only the right words cleared it away. I was seeing my childhood. Our neighbor who lived on the other side of the fence and whom I had long forgotten. I was 6 when he was 60. Never before could he have been interesting to me. And why him specifically? No matter. Suddenly I saw him. I understood his life. I felt his anxiety and his joy. Suddenly his house, his garden, his beautiful but not so young Tsarina of a wife appeared before me. And with these images, words emerged. Words that could describe them. A plot line materialized and filled up with meaning. Unexpectedly, the subtext and hidden significance of this yet-to-be-written story appeared, the eternal metaphor of banishment from paradise. My external eyes were still awaiting the sunrise, while my internal ones were looking around, seeking out details. Here is one, here is another, here is a whole bunch. As soon as I was able to emerge from my room into the dim light of the table lamp, I typed up my first ever short story in great haste. I knew just how to do it, what to write, what not to write, and I understood that what remains unwritten possesses a special kind of power, a certain gravity by absence, similar to a magnetic force that can both attract and repel, a force we can't see, but that is nonetheless there. This heretofore invisible, hidden world was now within my reach. I could enter it at any point, but it had particular doors, with keys of sound, with lockpicks of intonation. The doors could be opened with love or with tears. One day, all of a sudden, my sliced up eyes could see again. My vision returned completely and immediately, 2020, as promised. And this was bliss. Meanwhile, I found that the second world, having first appeared to me in darkness, was here to stay. It turned out to be a multifaceted underside of so-called reality, a dungeon full of treasure, an ethereal world through the looking glass, a mysterious box with passcodes to all enigmas, an address book with the exact coordinates of those who never existed. I don't know its geography, its mountains, or its seas. It is so vast, it must be limitless. Or perhaps it's not simply one world. Perhaps there are many. They are unpredictable. They can show themselves to you or not. Some days they may not let you inside. Sorry, the doors are locked. We're on holiday. But to the patient and the devoted, they will in the end always yield. The doors will open and you won't know what you will come across until you enter. And the second story is called Aspic. Yeah, I know Americans don't like aspic. We do, but it's not so simple. The matter is not so simple. Truth be told, I've always been afraid of it, since childhood. It's prepared not casually or whenever the fancy strikes you, but most often for New Year's Eve, in the heart of winter, in the shortest and most brutal days of December. Darkness comes early. There is a damp frost. You can see spiky halos around the street lamps. You have to breathe through your mittens. Your forehead aches from the cold and your cheeks are numb. But wouldn't you know it, you still have to boil and chill the aspic. The name of the dish itself makes the temperature of your soul drop, and no thick gray goat hair shawl will save you. It's a special kind of religion, making the aspic. It's a yearly sacrifice, though we don't know to whom or for what. And what would happen if you don't make it is also a question mark. But for some reason, it must be done. You must walk in the cold to the market. It is always dim there, never warm there. Past the tubs with pickled things, past the cream and the creme fraiche redolent of girlish innocence, past the artillery depot of potatoes, radishes, and cabbages, past the hills of fruit, past the signal lights of clementines to the farthest corner. That's where the chopping block is. That's where the blood and the axe are. Call Russia to the axe. To this one right here, digging its blade into a wooden stump. Russia is here. Russia is picking out a piece of meat. Igor, chop up the legs for the lady. Igor lifts his axe, hack, lays out the white cow knees, cleaves the shanks. Some buy pieces of the muzzle, lips, and nostrils. And those who like pork broth, they get little pig feet with baby hooves. Holding one of those, touching its yellow skin is creepy. What if it suddenly shook your hand in return? None of them are really dead. That's the conundrum. There is no death. They are hacked apart, mutilated. They won't be walking anymore or even crawling. They've been killed, but they are not dead. They know that you've come for them. Next, it's time to buy something dry and clean, onions, garlic, roots, and herbs. And back home through the snow you go, crunch, crunch. the frosty building entryway. The light bulb has been stolen again. You fumble in the dark for the elevator button. Its red eye lights up. First, the intestines appear in the elevator's wrought iron cage, then the cabin itself. Our ancient St. Petersburg lifts are slow. They click as they pass each floor, testing our patience. The chopped up legs in the shopping bag are pulling your arm down, and it seems as if at the very last moment they'll refuse to get into the elevator. They'll twitch, break free, and run away, clacking across the ceramic tile. Clippity-clap, clippity-clap, clippity-clap. Maybe that would be for the best? No, it's too late. At home, you wash them and throw them into the pot. You set the burner on high. Now it's boiling, raging. Now the surface is coated with gray, dirty ripples. All that's bad, all that's weighty, all that's fearful, all that suffered, darted and tried to break loose, oinked and mooed, couldn't understand, resisted and gasped for breath. All of it turns to muck. All the pain and all the death are gone, congealed into repugnant, fluffy felt. Finito. Placidity, forgiveness. Then it's time to dump this dead water, to thoroughly rinse the sedated pieces under a running faucet, and to put them back into a clean pot filled with fresh water. It's simply meat, simply food. All that was fearsome is gone. A calm blue flower of propane, just a little bit of heat. Let it simmer quietly. This is a 5 to 6 hour undertaking. While it cooks, you can take your time preparing the herbs and the onions. You'll be adding them to the pot in 2 batches. First, 2 hours before the broth finishes cooking, and then again an hour later. Don't forget to stir in plenty of salt, and your labor is done. By the end of the cooking cycle, there will have been a complete transfiguration of flesh. The pot will be a lake of gold with fragrant meat, and nothing will remind us of Igor. The kids are here. They are looking at the pot, unafraid. It's safe to show them this soup. They won't ask any tough questions. Stain the broth, pull the meat apart, slice it with a sharp knife, as they did in the olden days, in the age of the Tsar, and the other Tsar, and the third Tsar, before the advent of the meat grinder, before Vasily the Blind, and Ivan Kalita, and the Cumans, and Rurik, and Cineas, and Ruvor, who, as it turns out, never even existed. Set up the bowls and the plates, and place some fresh-pressed garlic in each one. Add the chopped up meat. Use the ladle to pour over it some thick, golden, gelatinous broth. And that's that. Your job is done. The rest is up to the frost. Carefully take the bowls and plates out to the balcony. Cover the coffins with lids. Stretch some plastic wrap over them and wait. Might as well stay out on the balcony, bundled up in your shawl. Smoke a cigarette and look up at the winter stars, unable to identify a single one. Think about tomorrow's guests. Remind yourself that you need to iron the tablecloth, to add sour cream to the horseradish, to warm the wine and chill the vodka, to grate some cold butter, to place the sauerkraut in a dish, to slice some bread, to wash your hair, to dress up, to do your makeup, foundation, mascara, lipstick. And if you feel like senselessly crying, do it now, while nobody can see you. Do it violently, about nothing and for no reason, sobbing, wiping away your tears with your sleeve, stubbing out your cigarette against the railing of the balcony, not finding it there, and burning your fingers. Because how to reach this there and where this there is, no one knows. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you both again. I have a question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. If you have a question, please stand up and speak up so that we can all hear you. It really struck me that both of your work seem to deal with how we use memories to sort of like find a vision or a story for ourselves, and also a vision for the future. So I was wondering if there is a specific kind of memory that you think is, or that you find useful for writing, or when writing.
It's a question for me?
For both of us. Yeah.
Okay. And this novel of mine is, people believe that it is about the future, but it is not a real future in the sense of science fiction. But I just observe the now, now time, our time, and in the time in which we are living, there is a hidden future. And that's the time of my novel, I think.
For me, the memory as an idea, as the ability to keep memories and to travel through them is extremely important, because I don't see any future as such. I never think about future. I don't even imagine future, except for some obvious, what will happen next summer, tomorrow, all these little things, but not really. I don't think about it. But I do think about the past all the time. And the more I get into it, the more interesting it becomes. I can travel through past. So for me, it's just a very dear thing to do.
Anyone has a question? Go ahead.
I wonder if you could both tell us about the function of humor in your work.
The function of humor.
A function of humor. The humor of part of my nature, so I don't have to put it, It is everywhere. And when you are thinking about one question, for example, pollution or the serious problem, if you don't have humor, you have only two options, yes or no, But the humor opens the space, bigger space to think. It's the space for imagination and free associations. That is the humor need not to concentrate for the decision A or B or no or yes, but to open your mind, I think.
Yeah, I cannot but agree. I would perhaps add that imagine if there were no humor in the text, or just in conversation or in life, it would be impossible. Everything is so serious and so sad. It's better not to live if you have no humor, I guess. And also, I think that humor is what differs us from animals. So animals are wonderful, but they don't have humor. So perhaps that's what stopped them from turning into thinking and creatures, and those who really suffer and or laugh the way we do. Okay, so that's perhaps it.
Do you have something to add? Yeah. Well, how about this? Can you think of any other worlds or times or landscapes that you want to write about in the future? You don't have to answer it.
Well, they just appear. They come. The imaginary landscapes come from. I wouldn't say from nowhere. There is a place from where they do come. Sometimes they are they come in your dreams, which are based in turn on something you already saw, but something maybe they are based on what you are going to see. So the time sometimes goes in the opposite direction, but I see things all the time. I know I have a kind of a strange ability, like a disease of a sort. Very often, many times a day, I find myself both in this place and in some other place. I see places, I find myself there, and I even feel myself a different person. But I'm not crazy now.
Now, I don't want to write about the landscape in the future because it must be the changing the landscapes, changing climate, and it's a kind of tragedy for me. But I want to write about the language in the future. The language is changing, and what about the English language in 100 years, or the German, or maybe the English language become very simple language, that you're so simple grammar that everyone can learn it in 3 days. Or maybe the German language is changing because of many refugees. It's mixed with Arabic or other languages, and it became another language, and it will be the interesting subject for me. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Happy birthday, and we'll see you at the signing.
Not yet.